Boom, Watch fam! What is up, Watch fam, and welcome to ASKTNH, episode 117. Jesus Christ, it's come a long way. I am Christian from Theo and Harris, and before we jump into today's episode, I'll do a quick wristwatch check. I'm wearing a vintage Rolex Bubbleback. It's absolutely stunning. This one is not available on the shop yet, but I don't know when it's going to be honest. It's really just perfect head to toe. The kind of like caramel, orange, yellow dial that's patinaed from white with the yellow gold case and the blue seconds, all original. You know, I'm not going to keep it, but holy shit, do I want to. Anyway, this was actually not one of the new additions that went up on the shop, on the Theo and Harris shop on Tuesday, but 5 new watches did. So after this video, go check them out at theoandharris.com. They really were awesome, so check them out. But let's get into today's episode. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about micro brands. There are a dime a dozen. You know, whether they're on Kickstarter, whether they're self-funded elsewhere, or wherever. There are a ton of micro brands out there. Okay, so what is a micro brand? A micro brand is very simply, by definition, just a small brand, typically only recognizable or known by, you know, real enthusiasts, or that's local, or I guess now with the internet, international, whatever. But it's known by a very small group of people. They're usually independent brands. Now, this doesn't mean they're cheap. You know, I don't think, you guys could correct me on this, I don't think there's really a difference between independent and micro, just kind of scale. I think, you know, micro brands are at a lower scale, whereas independents typically, you know, have larger scale, much more luxury, whatever. Autodromo is a wonderful example of a micro brand. I'm a big fan of Autodromo, especially on the pre-owned market, and I think it's a great example. So now I'm going to kind of give you guys 3 tips. I know a lot of you out there are starting micro brands. 3 tips for starting a micro brand, or 3 tips for if you're just a consumer evaluating one and seeing, you know, the merit, and if you really should like it, and being a little bit more critical, I think, is super important. So let's get into it. The first step is white spaces. Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this all the time, and if you guys are fans of Gary, you know that we take a lot from Gary, and I'm very inspired by him. It's important. White spaces are essentially where in your market, what is empty? What isn't being done, do that, right? And do it very, very well, which is just as important as even doing it, right? Because if you're not going to do it well, then just don't do it. So in your market, you know, what isn't being done? Are cases not being finished to a degree that you would like? I mean, or are they, but not in the, you know, very industrial way that you enjoy? You know, so if cases are being super well finished, but only in the refined kind of like, you know, Bauhaus way, how else can you do it? You know, are dials being done well, but not being done differently in a way that's maybe, you know, channeling, I don't know, 80s art. I don't know what it is. I mean, you're just thinking about anything here. How can you execute in a way that's not being executed right now? So basically being niche. Not being niche for the sake of being niche, but being niche because there's a purpose there. There's an empty space, and you can be the person to fill it. That is super important, right? Because if you do that, you avoid redundancy. You avoid being left within the mix of the same other brands, right? You become almost, although not technically, it's not proprietarily yours, that market can become yours. You know, you can be kind of the founder of that market, and people will follow because that's what people do, they follow. So you can really kind of captain a whole area, which is super important. Don't just make the same thing someone else is doing, and again, it doesn't make any sense to me. Executing on that, you know, I'll revisit this again later, but don't just do it, like, do it, you know, and I'm going to do a whole other video about this after this, but like, don't just do it. You know, do it. Not to reiterate, but it's the truth. You know, I know some people that want to start companies. They want to like design a watch. They want to design this. They want to ask for my advice. Nothing ever happens. You know, and it's kind of like it's a waste of time. So I think that's my kind of like first thing. Find the white space and fill it. Next, narrative. First of all, have a narrative, and don't make one up necessarily. I mean, like really, you know, be honest, but more so, communicate that narrative, and communicate it really, really, really well every single day, several times a day on different social mediums. There's no substitute for actual, you know, I don't want to say just hard work, but persistence. You can't buy it. You know, you're not going to be able to buy unless you're going to buy a company that's been persistent for 3 years. You know, of course you could do that, but if you're going to found a company, you just have to keep doing it. You have to find your narrative and develop your narrative. And where are you now? And where were you? And how did you get there? And why am I interested in staying on your website? That is so incredibly important, and not enough people are doing it. Your product doesn't speak loudly enough on its own. It just doesn't. You know, Rolex does because it's Rolex, but your product doesn't. no matter who you are, almost no matter who you are. So you have to, further make people, fall in love with you, and fall in love with your brand, not just your product. Fall in love with you, your brand, and yes, ultimately your product. That's how they show their appreciation and their love. It's really, really important, and not enough big brands do it, nonetheless small brands. Which brings me to my next point. I am an enormous advocate for making no money. I'm very aggressive on the idea that you just don't deserve to make money yet, and when you do, you will. But you're better off sacrificing that margin for tomorrow. And that's just huge. Tesla, Elon Musk, of course, that's the go-to guy for entrepreneurs to say oh, I love him and he's great, but it's true. I mean, if you guys have spent any time reading about him or watching his videos, it's just incredible. In announcing the Model 3, Elon Musk explained that the first 4 models were just to get here. The X, the S, the this, the that, the truck, the sports car, everything served a purpose to get to this point, which also happens to be the massively profitable point. He knew that if I build market equity and work for, how many years this company's been open for, and invest this much money and sacrifice my gains, right? Not actually taking that money, but reinvesting and working toward the next 10 years or 5 years or 4 years, however long you can afford, because obviously he can afford longer because the kind of money that he can raise, we all can't raise that kind of money, most of us can't. That to me is such an interesting idea, right? When these people like Elon Musk invest in something this large, at this magnitude, they're not doing it for tomorrow or in 2 years or in 3 years or in 4 years. And I get it, it's to pay your bills, but that's why I think that Gary talks a lot about side hustles and working on the side and doing things at night. But my big point is, don't play the short game. Don't cash out now. Don't charge too much. Take that margin, bring it home, and pay your overpriced rent because you can't fathom the idea of living in a less expensive apartment. And this is just man-to-man advice or man-to-woman advice or whatever, or boy, frankly, I'm 21, but this is really what more that is. It's more business advice or person advice. But think about your business, put it first. I see so many brands out there that it's just it's a cash grab. Take the money and run, and that's it. They don't give a shit about their brand. They don't give a shit about making you a customer for the next 5 years. The way we look at customers at TNH and clients at TNH is one, in a very personal way. If you deal with TNH, you know that how personal we are. That I answer all our emails. They're usually about they're just very personal. The whole idea is very personal. But the idea behind that, is yes, if we are personal, right? And it really, realistically, how many watches can someone buy a year? I can't make someone buy 3-4 watches a year. It's not necessarily pragmatic, but if I'm going to get one watch, right, per year sale to each person, each of our serious clients, that's great, right? But how do you then, scale up? And if I invest in them, if I invest in making them personal, and I invest in actually knowing them well, right? And I invest more time, which obviously means a less, percentage return per my hour, right? Or my hour of work. I'm making less money, technically speaking, for my labor. I know that I'll be able to get a poster out of that person. I'll be able to get, a T-shirt or whatever, because they're going to care enough about TNH that they're going to say, "Whoa, that's awesome! They made T-shirts. Let's buy one." And that's the point. Run your business in a way that is totally it almost seems backwards. You're making less money, but in the net long game, you're going to build a stronger, better, more secure, more reliable, more stable business. And that's just very personal question. If it's a money game, there have been people who have done money and runs things for decades that have made a lot more money than I'll probably ever make. So if that's just what you're looking out for, then maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's totally possible. Actually, it's probably pretty likely. The guy who sold the Brooklyn Bridge wasn't looking to build customer relationship programs, and he made a lot more money than I do. So maybe that's it. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But in my opinion, if you're looking to build a real brand, a brand that people are going to respect and enjoy and have a relationship with, then don't just look at each model right now as the model. Look at it as a piece to bring you to the next endpoint. Right, and that I think if you look at your brand that way, you'll have so much of a better business in 5 years, and that's what's really important, right? You can kind of eat it for 5 years, especially if you're young. It's not that big of a deal, but that's kind of my point. If you guys find your white spaces, find these spaces that no one else is really competing with, become the king of that space, communicate, right? Tell everyone why you are the best. More people are going to flock, and then don't cash out soon. right? Realize that there is value, there's tremendous value in a 5, 6, 7, 10-year plan. And that's it, guys. Don't be penny wise, dollar foolish. That's what my dad always said. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching Ask TNH, episode 117. Hope you guys have an awesome day, and check out the watch shop at theoandharris.com.